Dear young athlete, who you are is more important than what you do. What you do in sports, what you do in your career, what you accomplish in life, those are all good and important things. But who you become in the process is much more important. What's up, people? Welcome to the Dear Young Athlete podcast, where we talk to athletes and coaches about their journeys and what advice they would give to a younger version of themselves. I'm your host, Jacob Thompson, but you can call me JT. On each episode of this podcast, I'm going to have a guest that I'm going to interview about their journey. So let me introduce to you our first guest. This man today is a husband, he's a father, he's a pastor and author, a recording artist, he is a paracyclist, and as of right now, he is a podcaster. If you did not figure it out, this person is me. That's right. On our first episode, I am going to tell you my story and tell you about who I am and why I'm doing this podcast. First off, let me acknowledge that I talk slow. This is a symptom of a rare disease that I have that I'll explain later in the episode. That being said, I will not be offended if you turn up the speed on this podcast. Let's get into it. The first question I'll normally ask our guests is, tell us about your athletic journey. Where did it begin for you and how did you fall in love with sports? I marked the beginning of my athletic journey in kindergarten. Pretty early on in the year, it came time for fitness testing. From what I can recollect, I got first place in pretty much every test, but one test stuck out to me in particular. It was the pull-up test. I jumped up on the bar and did as many pull-ups as I could. When I got down, the teacher said, "Wow, that's a school record. You did 16 pull-ups." At that point, I instantly was cool and I had friends, and that began me beginning to form my identity in playing sports and competing. That year, my brother was in third grade. One day, I followed him to practice, and to my surprise, the coach let me play on the second and third grade team. That year, I played on the baseball and the basketball team for the second and third graders. I'll never forget one game. This other kid lined up across from me at the beginning of the game, and he laughed when he looked at me. He said something to the effect of, "If you guys want to lose, that's fine." That got me so fired up that I shut this kid down for the whole game. That year, though I was only in kindergarten, was foundational in me beginning to love sports and love competing. Fast forward, I'm 11 years old. My baseball team wins the league championship game, and I'm awarded with the game ball. My coach pulls me aside and says, I truly believe someday you could play professional baseball." At that point, that became my dream. I wanted to be a collegiate and then a professional athlete. Whether it was baseball or hockey, I didn't care. The following year, I was in seventh grade. I went to a big middle school with about 400 kids in my grade. When it came time for the annual pentathlon, a competition of running, jumping, push-ups, things of that nature, I won first place in the entire grade. That summer, my brother had friends over one day and they were playing backyard football. They invited me to play because they were short one player. Up until this point, I had never played football, besides 1 year when I was in third grade. I had missed most of the beginning practices and they had put me on the defensive line. I didn't have that much fun, so I stopped playing. but now I would be reintroduced to the game. That day, I pretty much dominated my brother's friends and scored several touchdowns. After giving it some thought, I decided I would sign up and play football that year. When I went to my first football practice and put pads on, I felt like a whole new world had opened up to me, and I knew that I was where I was meant to be. I'll never forget the first game of the year. I was playing receiver, and we had a play called the quick pass. The quarterback would hike it and throw it to me immediately, and the other receiver would block. The problem was the other team was in press coverage. The quarterback would hike the ball, throw it to me, and I would get tackled immediately. This happened 3 or 4 times, and I was beginning to feel discouraged. At that point, the coach called a new play that wasn't in our playbook. He called it the fake quick pass and go. We were at about our own 40-yard line. The quarterback hiked the ball. He faked the pass to me, and the defense jumped. I took off down the field, and the quarterback hit me in stride. I ran it all the way in for a touchdown. Scoring my first touchdown was a feeling that I can't really describe. It was unlike anything really I'd felt before, besides scoring a goal in hockey or hitting a home run in baseball. In that moment, I truly fell in love with football. As the season went on, I played in every play. I scored a touchdown every game, and I had a great year. At the end of the season, our coaches gathered up me and 2 other players and told us someday we could play varsity football at Mounds View High School. The next year, I entered as a freshman at Mounds View High School. Before the season began, we all had to complete what was called football relays. This was our version of the NFL Combine. We would run 40-yard dashes, do max lifts, and do a couple other competitions. At the end, you would be scored by point system, and the top 10 in each grade would be announced at the back to football night. I went out and competed in football relays and ended up scoring 3rd in my grade. On the first day of 9th grade, the gym teacher handed out a Post-it note, and he asked everyone to write down how they wanted to be remembered when they left high school. I wrote down a football star. That's how I wanted to be remembered. Football was a big deal at the high school. The whole town would come and pack out the stands. The senior football players were the heroes of the whole school, it seemed like, and I wanted to be just like them. In high school, I stuck with football and baseball. Freshman, sophomore, and junior year all went well. I started on the grade level team each year and performed pretty well. At my school, it was pretty rare to get pulled up and play at a higher level. My junior year, there were 20 seniors starting on the football team. So I didn't worry about the fact that I was playing JV. I knew that next year would be my opportunity. The winter of my junior year, I went to a tri-school lifting and running competition. Again, you were scored on a point system. I won first place in my weight class by a landslide. I figured that was a good step towards becoming a college football or baseball player, and that senior year would be my time to shine and to earn a spot playing at the next level. Senior year came around, and it was time for football relays again. I had been in the top 5 each year, and I planned on doing so again. But this year, something different happened. I went to run my 40-yard dash, and I was slower. I wasn't just slower than last year, I was slower than my freshman year. When I went to do my max lifts, I couldn't lift as much as I had done in the past. When two-a-day practice started, I was feeling slower, weaker. My breaks were not as quick. My hands were not as good. I had a general decline in my performance, and I couldn't explain it. In the first couple games, I was in competition for a starting spot, but as the season went on, I ended up getting beat out, and I watched the majority of that season from the sidelines. I watched as my dreams of being a collegiate and a professional athlete came crashing down. I watched as my best friends scored touchdowns, made interceptions, and had articles written about them in the newspaper. I struggled in my identity and to know who I was if I wasn't a star athlete. Eventually, the football season came to an end. My team lost by 5 points in the section championship game. Normally, it would be time to start training for baseball, but I decided that I wasn't going to play this year. I realized that I was going to be sitting on the bench. My two best friends also were quitting baseball, and I didn't want to be a bench warmer by myself. So I didn't play. Instead, I played tennis. My school had been to the state tournament 10 years in a row. It was my first year playing competitive tennis, and I played on JV. I did have a good year and went 14-1, but during that time, it all hit me. My dream of being a collegiate and a professional athlete was over. My identity was crushed. What was my purpose now? I didn't really know. That summer, my football coach showed up at my graduation party. He wrote me a really nice card, and at the end of the letter, he said, "If you ever want to coach football, you're welcome to coach at Mounds View High School." I went to college, and for the first time, I wasn't involved on an actual sports team. I didn't really know what to do with myself. I'll talk about this more later, but in high school, I've been impacted by a couple of mentors who coached me in football and baseball and led young life. Without playing sports and without much to do, I became a young life leader. I wanted to impact younger guys just like my mentors had impacted me. After doing this for 2 years, my group of guys was going into high school. It was the perfect time to take up my coach on his offer to coach football. I gave him a call, and sure enough, I was hired. That began my journey of coaching. Since then, I've coached high school football for 7 years. I've coached AAU basketball for 2 years, high school baseball for 2 years, and church basketball for about 7 years as well. Coaching has been an amazing way to stay connected to the game and with competition. During my time in college, I still love playing sports. Pickup basketball, volleyball, racquetball, just to name a few. I stayed consistent working out and playing sports with friends several times each week. However, the decline in my physical abilities that began in my senior year of high school only continued. I started getting worse and worse balance. I had less and less energy. At times, I began to feel dizzy. I began to notice that I had trouble carrying things up and down the stairs. Several experiences like this led me to eventually see a doctor. After a long series of tests, I was diagnosed with the rare disease called Friedreich's ataxia, or FA. FA is something that you're born with, and you have a mutation in your genetic code that results in a low production of a protein called frataxin. Not having enough frataxin leads to damage in your cerebral cortex, eventually causing difficulties in balance, coordination, speech, energy production. This disease leads most patients into a wheelchair and to have a shortened life expectancy. Being diagnosed with FA had a twofold response for me, part of which I'll talk about more later. On one hand, it was very difficult knowing that I have a disease that would only get worse, that it would change the whole trajectory of the rest of my life. On the other hand, it helped me make sense of everything that had transpired in my life up until that point. My dreams of being a collegiate and professional athlete, my decline in my physical abilities, it all finally made sense. Since my diagnosis, FA has taken a lot from me. It's taken away my ability to run and even to do daily activities that normal people can do. My lack of energy, balance, and coordination limits me on a daily basis from doing things such as exercising or even doing household chores. I thought my athletic journey was coming to an end. Playing obviously had been over for years, but coaching has got more and more difficult too. I debate whether or not I'll be able to continue. But that changed in this last year. My wife and I decided to watch the show Friday Night Lights. In the show, Jason Street is the starting quarterback. He has dreams of going to the NFL, but in the first game, he suffers a terrible injury and is paralyzed from the waist down. He'll never play football again. Later in the show, however, he finds out about Paralympic wheelchair rugby and he begins competing. When I saw this in the show, I began to wonder if maybe I could compete in para athletics. The problem is, many people that compete in wheelchair basketball or sled hockey or wheelchair rugby have sustained some type of injury that may have put them in a wheelchair, but they still have full strength, balance, and coordination of their upper bodies. That's not the case for me. I have a loss of coordination, and even being in a wheelchair would not be able to solve that problem. I would not be able to be competitive in wheelchair basketball or rugby. I put the thought aside, but then I found out that there is such a thing as paracycling. In paracycling, there are several different classes. One class is for specifically people who have neuromuscular injuries or diseases. When I found that out, it sparked something inside me that made me want to find out if I could actually compete in paracycling. Since then, I began working with the coach and I am training 6 days a week. My goal eventually is to make it to the Paralympics, but we'll see. It's going to be a hard road. So that is my athletic journey up to this point. If you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I'll make sure to keep you updated on what happens. The next question I'm going to ask each guest on our podcast is to tell us about your spiritual journey. What are the things that have happened in your life that have allowed you to grow in your faith and to share your faith with others? I grew up going to church here and there, praying before meals and before bed. As I grew older, though, I began to have tournaments on Sundays and during the summer that didn't allow me to go to church camp or Sunday school as often. I became disinterested in the things of God. I never felt engaged by church as a young kid who was more interested in playing sports and riding his bike around with friends. By the time I got to high school, I really wanted nothing to do with God or church. I was more interested in playing sports, being popular, and getting girls to like me. I didn't think church would accomplish any of those things. My freshman year, I was coached in football and baseball by two guys who went to a nearby Christian college and led a program called Young Life. I noticed something different about these guys. They weren't negative, they weren't angry, they didn't cuss at their players, and they generally were fun. Beyond that, they took an interest in me and my friends beyond just sports. They invited us out to eat, to play pickup basketball, or to go to the movies. I thought this was weird since they were much older. They must not be able to get girlfriends, I thought. But eventually they invited us to Young Life. I said no many times, but eventually I noticed a lot of the older football players that I looked up to went to Young Life. It must not be that bad. Also, a lot of cute girls went, so I figured I'd check it out. When I went to Young Life for the first time, I remember actually having fun, being engaged, and being able to relate to what was happening there. At the end of the night, we heard a message about Jesus. I don't remember the message, but I remember feeling like the leaders there actually cared about me. Eventually, I became very involved in Young Life and Bible study. Each week, I would go to Young Life Club on Monday and Bible study on Sunday evening. Though I began learning and studying the Bible, in many ways, I was still far off from God. I thought it was more about what I could do and trying to be a good person and keep a certain set of rules. But in many ways, my heart was still far from God. During my senior year, it seemed like my whole identity and my purpose came crashing down when I sat on the bench during the football season. As my identity came crashing down, I began to look more and more into what the Bible said about who I am and why I exist. After my senior year of high school, my Young Life group took a backpacking trip to Colorado. During this trip, we had time to explore the wilderness, spend quiet time alone with a few verses of scripture and our prayers. At night, we would gather and share about what we have been learning and about our individual stories. For the first time, I was able to really connect with God. And for the first time with other people, I was able to open up and be vulnerable about some of the struggles that I had experienced. I was able to freely confess my sins for the first time. In doing so, I felt a weight literally lifted off me, and it was like something washed through me. I felt God's love and acceptance, and I marked this as a major turning point of going from having a rule book and a list of do's and don'ts to having an actual relationship with God that influenced everything I did on a daily basis. When I got home, I was determined to read the Bible and to pray daily. I went off to the Christian college that my leaders had gone to, where I was able to get involved with a community that also wanted to grow spiritually. Through Bible study, community, fellowship, and service, I was able to grow closer and closer to God. I mark these years as a time of laying my spiritual foundation and building it on the rock. Graduated college, got married, and got a job doing full time ministry in Minneapolis and coaching high school football. Everything was going great until my diagnosis. When I was diagnosed with the FA, it felt like my whole future was crushed. I wondered if God was still with me, if I still had a purpose, if my life still had any meaning. Though in many ways, FA has been difficult, it has shown me what it means to put my hope in my eternal resting place and not in my earthly circumstances. I've learned the truth of many scriptures that point to the fact that we'll all have trials and tribulations in this life, but when we keep our faith, we'll be made stronger and be made into the people that God wants us to be. I have difficult days and I have good days. I have highs and I have lows, but one thing remains steady, and that's my relationship with God that anchors me through the storms of life. I know that one day I'll be in a place with no pain, no tears, no sickness, no death, no FA. And I surely hope that you will join me there. I've seen God work in some pretty cool ways through my story. When I had a dream of being a professional athlete, it was all about me. I wanted to stand up and hit a home run or score a touchdown and have everyone cheer for me. Now, instead, I've been able to stand on stages in front of lots of people. And instead of having them glorify me, I've been able to share about who God is and have them glorify Him. I've put my story into a book called From Diagnosis to Destiny. Your trials aren't meant to break you, they're meant to make you. I would love for you to check it out at the website. With that, I'll transition into the next question that I'll ask our guests. What is one lesson that you've learned playing sports that has impacted your life beyond sports? Well, there are so many lessons I could think of, but one sticks out. I can still hear one of my football coaches in my ear saying, "Players play, coaches coach, and officials officiate." His point was, focus on your job and what you can control, and don't worry about the rest. This lesson has stuck with me in life beyond sports. I can't control that I was born with the rare disease. There are many things that happen in life that are out of my control, but I can control my attitude, my effort, and my response. If I can focus on those things, then I'll be able to move forward and make the best out of the situation. Lastly, I'll have our guest complete this statement. Dear young athlete, here's what I'll say. Dear young athlete, who you are is more important than what you do. What you do in sports, what you do in your career, what you accomplish in life, those are all good and important things. But who you become in the process is much more important. Are you a person of character, of integrity? What would those who love you and who are close to you say about you? How do you treat other people? That is much more important than what you do, and it will carry you a lot further than any talent that you may have. So, while you play your sport, while you do your best, don't forget to also develop your character and hopefully your faith in Christ. Thank you so much for taking time to hear my story. I hope that you'll join me on the journey of the Dear Young Athlete podcast, as we will have many inspiring stories with great messages for you to listen to. And with that, thank you very much. Until next time. Hey, thank you so much for listening to the Dear Young Athlete podcast. Make sure you check out our website linked in the description and find out how you could bring Dear Young Athlete to your team or your group. Check out our merchandise and use code all caps DYA20 and take 20% off your first order. Also, consider partnering with us on Patreon. You'll get regular discounts, you'll get exclusive content, and you'll be supporting a great movement. Wherever you're listening, make sure you follow and leave us a review. It really helps the algorithm and helps this podcast reach more people. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.